I've got Deek Richards on the phone. This time, not a cell phone, but for his immediate safety in a public place on a regular phone, so he'll be easier to hear. He told a story the other night you might not have heard, because it occurred late in the program. It's a story virtually of a second Roswell that you may never have heard before. There was so much interest the first time he told the story, and I mean from the highest level UFO researchers, that I thought before I turned his phone number, and he's authorized me to do that, over to them, that I would bring him on the air one more time and let him tell his incredible story. And there are a couple of things we hadn't heard before. We'll get to those. This is about a crash retrieval with bodies in Germany, folks. Serious story. I received a 3-page fax from a man named Deek Richards about, several days ago. An absolutely riveting fax detailing what do you want to call it? A crash and a retrieval in Germany. Might as well call it what it is, the Fulda Gap area. Now, I wanted to bring Deek back on. There's been deep interest from high up in the UFO community. So, Deek, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, excellent. I like regular phones so much better than cell phones, Deek.
It does sound better, doesn't it?
Yeah, much better. All right, what I would like you to do now, relax, take a deep breath, and unwind this story for me. Where did you grow up, Deek?
I grew up in Maine.
In Maine. So
way up there in the confines of northern Maine on a dairy farm.
So then you've always sort of been in that area.
Oh, yes. Definitely.
Except when you went into military service. When was that?
I went into the military. I first originally joined when I was in high school still on the delayed entry program.
Well, you were really anxious, weren't you?
Well, they have Armed Forces Day there at the high school,
What year was that? Do you remember?
1979.
1979.
Yeah, right after I graduated, they didn't waste no time sending me into boot camp. Fort Lost in the Woods, Missouri, down there in Missouri.
And
we called it Fort Lost in the Woods, Missouri, but that's Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri.
Well, I was in the Air Force. I was in basic training, and I know the misery, so I'd go with that. Anyway, listen. You joined. You went through some sort of tech school, probably.
Right. I went down there I did my AIT down there in Fort Leonard Wood as well. That's my advanced individual training.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to...
and what was that for?
Recovery.
Recovery?
Yes. My MOS was a 63 whiskey. At that time, in 79, before they rechanged the numbers of the MOS structures back there in the late 80s there, was a 63 whiskey.
Right. Recovery of what?
Recovery of any wheeled vehicle.
Oh, okay. All right. Anything that might get stuck out there or crash or have trouble or whatever.
I knew exactly what I wanted to do because up there in one of our cornfields, a guy got stuck there one night, and I had to go out there at 2 o'clock in the morning to get him out of there because if my father found this guy in our cornfield, he would have had butt full of buckshot.
I hear you.
Don't mess up our cornfield.
All right. What rank did you attain in the military?
E6.
E6. How long? Oh, E6, huh?
Yes. Because the cutoff scores were so low, because 63 whiskey, there wasn't that many in the field, so the cutoff scores were very low, and so I made rank quick.
Mm-hmm. You were in for how long?
I was in for 10 years.
10 years. So
and I got out, and you can say I went out on early retirement, out on my own.
Okay. You were assigned in Germany from whence to whence?
I was there from December of 79 till April of 84. 4.5 years.
Of 84. All right. Now, in your job, where were you in Germany?
My first duty assignment there in Germany was with the 29th Supply and Service Company in Baumholder. We were up there on top of the hill, right there in Wetzel Kaserne. We shared the Kaserne with the 48th Maintenance Company.
Okay, so you did what you normally do. You retrieved, I take it, normally.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Being in a supply and service company there, we had a laundry and bath platoon, and they went out to the field quite often to service other military units, infantry a lot that was in there. And Baumholder was, the headquarters for 8th ID was up there in Bad Kreuznach, but the 8th ID, the main contingent of the 8th ID, the 8th Infantry Division, was right there in Baumholder, so our laundry platoon had to go out quite often. And so we had a wrecker. Before they changed the TO&E, we had a wrecker.
Okay.
And I was the only 63 whiskey there in the unit, and I was assigned, of course, to the wrecker.
How long had you been in Germany when the incident, we'll call it, occurred?
Well, let's see. The incident occurred during Reforger of 82, so let's say September. So let's say almost 3 years. Okay.
So you had been there almost 3 years, and then what sends you out on this retrieval, on this mission? Do you get a phone call?
Okay. Well, I'll lay it out for you.
All right.
The 29th Supply and Service Company during Reforger had gotten tasked to support the 11th ACR, which is the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment up there in Bad Hersfeld, Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And they patrol the 1K zone, no man's land, to Fulda Gap.
Right, Fulda Gap. That's where people always speculated a war between Russia and the rest of the world.
That's where the first ground units would come across.
That's where it would all begin.
That's right.
Okay.
So we're standing in the chow line there at Old Morning 30, 0600, I guess it was. I don't remember there, but I was still outside the tent when we heard this big, huge bang and a thud.
That's
okay, and
right.
you could feel the vibration right underneath your feet.
Uh-huh. And
I was still outside the door of the tent, like I said, and I managed to wheedle my way through the chow line. Everybody's wondering what that was. So I'm sitting down. I'm just about ready to dig into that wonderful Army SOS when the first sergeant came up to me and he says, "We got to go see the CO now."
What rank were you at that point? Do you recall?
E4.
E4. All right.
E4 on E5 list.
Right. All
okay?
right. Sure.
And so the first sergeant said, well, obviously when the first sergeant tells you to jump, you jump.
That's right.
So I went. And inside, when we got into the CO's tent, now you understand, we were out in the field, so everything was in a tent.
Right.
And so I went into the CO's tent, and he's on the phone with these people. I had no idea who he was on the phone there with. CO hung up the phone, and he told me to go get my wrecker ready and stand by.
Okay.
Okay, so I went out and I fired it all up and checked everything out and made sure everything was okay.
And I'm sure you're thinking, were you relating it to the boom at that point, thinking, well, maybe I'm going to go get whatever it is that fell down? Crashed.
Well, not at this particular junction because there was a lot of jumping around there because you had a lot of recovery to do because people were getting stuck up there and everything else all the time.
All right, so no connection yet.
Right.
Go ahead.
But the first sergeant bit was unusual, but no connection yet.
Right, okay.
Okay, so then the 48th Maintenance Wreckers coming right up by me, and instead of saying the wrecker, can I say his first name?
Yeah.
Okay, his name was Mike.
Okay.
And so anyway, Mike and I
let me stop you. You have a really good memory. I take it that called to do so, you could remember Mike's last name, no problem.
Yes. Oh,
okay. Mike
and I are still friends today.
All right. Oh.
He doesn't know I'm doing this.
Well, he might now. He might now. All right. Anyway, continue.
Okay. So Mike and I were standing out there. We're wondering what's going on. And I says, did you get any word? No, I just told here, stand here and wait. So 2 Jeeps come up and a deuce and a half come up, and then a het pulling a D7 bulldozer from the 293rd Engineers. And so then 2 helicopters fly in. Now, from this time to this time now, it's probably about an hour and a half. Okay. Because it's not too far past Chow. Okay. And I managed to grab me a piece of French toast anyway. But, yeah. So, anyway, these 2 helicopters fly in. And there are people jumping off that helicopter in Army fatigues. Now, at that time, we didn't have the BDUs. Okay, we still had the regular straight-style fatigues. Right. But the weird thing about these people is that they had no insignia, no U.S. Army, no U.S. Air, nothing on their suits at all.
Yeah, that's really weird.
No military insignia at all. And the officer that was in the first helicopter, he comes over to us and he says, Follow us, gentlemen. He gets into the Jeep, and we're trekking across the field. And because we had the Het with us, you know, which is a heavy equipment transport, at that time it was an M920 was the nomenclature.
Right.
And, you know, that can only travel 15 to 20 miles an hour when it's going cross country.
Right.
Okay? And it took us about maybe a half an hour to get to where we were.
You
didn't have no problem finding out where...
What kind of terrain is this?
Well, it's a field. It's an open field at first, okay, and then it goes into a small wooded area. And then once we got to the wooded area, we had no problem figuring out what we were going after because the trail this thing led was incredible.
So you were beginning to see what, a debris trail?
Right, we were beginning to see a debris trail.
Could you make out pieces of metal at that point? What were you?
No pieces of metal at that particular junction because we're right there up front, okay, and we stopped. And because they had to unload the bulldozer, okay, because, I mean, trees were just, I'm talking great big humongous fir trees. I mean, trees you can't get your arms around. These things were 50 to 60 feet tall, and they were uprooted. It was incredible. I mean, the trees were down. I mean, bang, boom, some of them were cut right in half.
All right, but in an obvious trail?
Yes, it was an obvious trail right through the woods.
All right.
Right through the woods. So the bulldozer was there to plow up the trees. Even that little D7, being the workhorse as it is, it had trouble moving some of them big fir trees.
Right.
And so the Jeeps were following first, and then it was the two wreckers, and then it was the deuce and half behind the wreckers that had the personnel in it.
All right.
So we're going for about 150 yards. And then he stops and tells us to put on our gas mask. Well, anybody that's ever been out in the field, you always have your web gear and your gas mask with you. And so we had to put our gas mask on. So we drove up another 20 yards, and then he made the dismount signal, and we all dismounted, got out of the wrecker and everything else. The bulldozer is continuing up. Now, at this point, the only thing that we could see was this huge, shiny thing sticking out of the ground. Okay, I personally call it looked like stainless steel. Okay?
All right. When you say huge, how big?
Well,
just a guess, I guess.
Pardon me?
Just a guess, I guess.
Well, when they put it on the flatbed, they had to bring in a special flatbed because of the length. It was a 60-foot flatbed.
Right.
Okay? What they do, the Army's got these stretch flatbeds.
Oh, yes.
They can stretch them out because the frame moves. Okay,
right.
And they had to move that out to 60 feet.
Okay.
Okay? And so the width of this thing was about 60 feet wide. And so we're going in there.
Circular?
Well, after we got it out of the ground, I like to call it an oval triangle. Because you take a triangle and just round off the edges.
Yeah.
And that's what you had. And the nose of this thing was buried straight down into the dirt.
Okay, I can picture that, sure.
Incredible. It was just buried right down into the dirt.
How much of it was buried?
Half of it.
Half of it, all right?
Yes.
Half of it. That's a lot. So there was a lot of that craft in the dirt.
Yes, there was. Yes,
all right.
Yes, there was, and it was very because at about the last 100 yards or so, I mean, it dug a trench. It dug a trench like you went in there with a bulldozer for a couple of days and just kept up piling up dirt. You know, the banks were, as the further in you went, the higher the banks went. I mean, there was roots all over the place and everything else. It was just incredible the destruction this thing did.
How many personnel on the scene at this point? Well,
at this point, with the people in the deuce and a half and the guys in the Jeep and Mike and I, there's about 20.
20. All right.
There's about 20, and we all walked up there. We all walked up to where this craft was. And that's when we saw the bodies. The bodies were completely on the left side of the craft, and it was like they were trying to walk out of the craft, and then they just fell dead in their tracks. And there was a strong smell of ammonia protruding from these bodies.
All right. Now, you didn't say that last time.
No, because I forgot about it.
They smelled like ammonia, huh?
Yes, they did. There was a strong smell of ammonia.
So it's like they walked off the craft, took a couple of whiffs of atmosphere, and fell over. I mean, I'm not saying that's why, but...
Right. Well, there were some that obviously made it further. They weren't staggered right in a line. The furthest one away was about 35 to 40 feet. Okay, and the closest one was about 5 feet.
All right.
And he was right up against the bank. And I'm assuming he just ran out of gas when he tried to climb up the bank, because the other ones were able to make it up the bank.
All right, so they were just scattered about. How many total?
5 of them.
5 bodies. All right.
5 of them.
You're listening to a crash retrieval story from a man, Deek Richards, who was stationed in Germany, an incident that occurred near the Fulda Gap in Germany that easily rivals Roswell. Here, this craft is halfway into the earth. You've got bodies of 5 of them strewn about, and take it from there.
Well, after the all clear was given, they had to bring in a radiation team and check for radiation. And now you're well into the day now. You know, everything's well into the day. They had to wait for the body bags. We had the all clear so we could remove our gas masks. That's how we knew the smell of ammonia. And, you know, if you got too close to these things, your throat would start to burn, your nostrils and everything. Have you ever been close to ammonia? It just knocks you right off your feet.
That's
basically what had happened. So the guys that were putting the bodies in a formation type so they could put them in the body bags still had to wear their gas masks.
What kind of guys are these?
These were the guys that were in the Deuce-Nap, just regular soldiers there.
All right.
E3s, E4s, you know, guys from different units that were just sent down there to help.
Right. And where are these people who didn't have an insignia at this point?
Well, they're the ones giving all the orders, and they're down there giving a close inspection of the craft.
All right.
And there was 3 of them.
All right.
Okay. One of the guys was over there at the bodies. The other one was over here talking to the bulldozer driver at this time. And the other one was over here talking to Mike and I how they wanted to do this. And
you mean retrieve the craft?
Right.
All right. How did you go about it?
Well, first of all, the bulldozer had to dig away some of the earth and had to make a trail so the wreckers could come in there. Now, you got to keep in mind something. People would be saying, well, why didn't they use helicopters? Well, you're talking about a wooded area. You're talking about fir trees that are 50 to 60 to 70 feet high.
Gotcha.
So, you know, a chopper wouldn't be very effective. So we had to wait for the bulldozer to get to where we get the wreckers in position. Meanwhile, Mike and I, we had to take our spade shovels, and we had to dig underneath the craft so we could put slings underneath there. They didn't want to use any metallic objects, you know, like a hook or a chain or anything else like that. They wanted us to use our canvas slings. So they had to bring them in special, okay? So you're waiting most of the day for the body bags and this stuff and everything.
In other words, there was a lot of time in between, right?
Right, exactly.
Might I ask, just very briefly, what in God's name were you guys talking about when you had a little time to talk? I mean, you must have said, what the hell are we doing?
Much to say, Art. I mean, you gotta take this in mind. I am just a backwards country boy from Maine, grew up on a dairy farm, and I'm thrust into this situation right here.
I know, but
I had to repeat my name over and over and over again. I had to help Mike. Mike, punch me. Make sure I'm still awake, please. You know, and Mike was just taking it in stride. Yeah, right, he was.
Did he punch you?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. I remember. All right. So anyway, you guys, do you know what you're dealing with? I mean, obviously these are not humans. It's a spaceship.
I want to say that the official news release was an F-4 aircraft. And I can tell you right now, this was not an F-4 aircraft.
I'm with you there. So
I
mean,
they said something. You know, it's like...
They said something.
It's like my
crashed.
little niece goes.
They said something crashed, but they said an F-4.
Right. And like my little niece goes, duh.
Duh, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Describe as best you're able these creatures.
Okay. Now, I was at no closer than 4 or 5 feet to these things.
Pretty close.
Yeah, exactly. And one of them was laying down on it was on its side, but it was face down in the dirt. And they were gray in color. And they had big heads, like a small pumpkin.
Uh-huh.
Their fingers were skinny and long.
Mm-hmm.
And they had black suits on.
Black suits?
Yes, black suits, black skin-tight suits.
which covered their whole
aerobic workers in leotards.
Yeah,
There you go.
Like leotards, all right.
That's what that's what I was trying to use before was leotards.
You could then your discernment of their skin color was from seeing either their face or
just a head. Well, I didn't see their face.
Or okay, then just
the faces.
the head.
The faces were down in were down in the dirt.
The heads were hairless.
Yes.
And they were gray.
Yes.
Okay.
They were gray.
All right.
And they had the black leotard suits on, and the one that was on its side had this on its chest. It had this weird writing. I'm familiar with the Cyrillic alphabet. The Russian alphabet. The backwards letters. You see hieroglyphics and everything else, but this resembled nothing I've ever seen. Okay, and it just looked like some kid had drew a design on there and end of story.
You mean sort of like just a scribbled design?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I don't have the vocabulary to put this into words, and still to this day, it gets, it upsets me when I speak about the body because they're freaking me out.
Could you take a piece of paper and, in your mind's eye, and could you draw something that would approximate it?
I could.
Okay.
Because I've seen it for every day for the last 20 years.
I hear you. All right. So you went busy trying to get straps.
Right. So the other deuce and a half had come in. He had finally come in with the body bags, and he had these chests with him too. And they were metal coffins. Okay.
Right.
They were the metal coffins that they ship.
Right.
And they had ice, so we had to go up there and help them because they had our straps in there too. So that's when I got close to the bodies.
All right.
Okay, when I was unloading the deuce and a half, and that's when I was right there with the bodies.
Right.
And then that's when they had them all in the formation and everything else. Then I got out of there. Because I couldn't stand the ammonia, and I don't want to put that damn gas mask on.
Yep.
Back on.
All right. So you're out of there. You're back to your job.
Yes, and I'm back at my job. I got the slings. Meanwhile, the guys are putting the bodies in ice and filling them up with ice, and they put them on the deuce and a half, and off the deuce and a half went. And then Mike and I, we grabbed our shovels, and we were figuring out, because, that's our MOS.
Right.
We're figuring out how are we going to do this. Well, obviously, we couldn't move it. The thing that we were going to have to do is just lift it up, turn it, so the flatbed could back right underneath it and put it onto the flatbed.
Gotcha.
That was the game plan.
All right.
So we had to dig underneath the craft so we could put the sling underneath there.
Right.
And both Mike and I, we got spade shovels, and we're by ourselves. And so the guys come over, and they called it a day for this day. They brought in tent. They weren't going to let nobody leave. And they called in other guys, and they set up tents and everything else for us. They brought in chow and the whole 9 yards, and we had to spend a night in a tent there, too. We weren't allowed to go back to our garrison. We weren't allowed to do nothing except just stay right there.
Until that job was done, that's where you were.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. And all the time in the tent, there's 3 of us in that one tent. We were fortunate because we had a smaller tent, and they brought in the cots, and we didn't say nothing to nobody. We were just sitting in there looking at each other, just wondering what's going on here. Are we, where are we? So anyway, the next day, we're out there, and we finally got enough dug underneath there where we could put the sling on each side of these things, and we positioned the wreckers out. One nice thing about the 5-ton wrecker, it's very, very versatile. It's got many, many purposes, many uses.
Right.
And by using boom supports and everything else, you drastically increase the capacity
Maybe so. This
of the boom winch.
This would be a first-time use, though, I have a feeling.
A first-time use?
Yeah. Just pick one of these up?
Oh, yeah.
All right, anyway.
Yeah, first time.
Anyway, I remember when you told the story before, you talked about some tubes, and you said when you got down low, when you were digging in, you actually got to sort of look into a part of the craft that...
Okay, now the left side, when you're looking at it from behind, the left side, which is the same place where the people came out, okay?
Right.
You can call them extraterrestrials. I just call them people. And anyway, there was these I'd say about 5-inch in diameter tubes coming out of the side because there was a gash in there. And I'm just assuming, my own personal assumption, that this happened when it hit them big fir trees.
Well, the gash in the craft, how big was that?
Oh, it went down into the dirt, obviously, but the part that was showing was about 20 feet.
20 feet.
About
Plenty
20
big
feet
enough for these beings to come out, or...
Well, no, the beings didn't come out of the gash.
Oh, they didn't?
No, the beings come out of a door.
A door. All right, so this was a separate opening, unintended opening, we'll say.
Yes, because
the
trees, I'm just assuming that the trees caused it. Okay, and there was no burn marks or nothing like that.
All right, and you did get one look sort of up in there at one point?
Well, you literally had to lay down on the ground. My ear had to touch the dirt to look up inside. And all I could see from where I was, from my vantage point, because most of the gas was down inside the dirt, but the tubes were coming out of the dirt, out of the craft, and it had this green ooze coming out of them, and it wasn't gushing out of there like a fire hose. It was just dripping out of there.
Anything, did it smell of anything? Or?
No, it didn't smell, but it was very luminescent at night. You could see the trail of it coming back in from about 150 yards out there. You could just see where it had touched one of the trees, and it was dripping off one of the trees.
That's very interesting, yes.
So, excuse me. So, the tubes were out there, and I mean, they weren't in any kind of order or anything like that. They were all over the place. But what I could see from up inside, now personally with my mechanical background and my knowledge of mechanics, I personally thought that this was the engine room. And what you could see up inside there was this great big, humongous, because it was dark inside there,
right?
Too, you got to understand that,
right?
And I didn't shine my flashlight up underneath there because I was in cramped quarters, okay? Because my ear was right down into the dirt when I'm taking one eye and being able to look up inside this.
Gotcha.
With the tubes out, and
so you can really barely see up into it.
Right. But what I could see, it was huge.
Any details you were able to make out at all? Was it just a giant empty room?
No, it wasn't empty. I mean, there was plainly machinery in there, some kind of machinery. That's what I'm saying. Is that there was some kind of machinery in there.
All right.
See, I'm lost for my vocabulary again. And
that's all right. So
no grinding gears or anything like that, but it was it looked like just an engine room, an engine room with a face on with a face on it. Okay, what I'm talking about, but a bulkhead maybe. There you go, bulkhead.
A bulkhead, all right.
Right, okay. And then at the edge of the bulkhead there was this machinery, okay. And it was like I've never seen nothing like this before in my whole entire life. I mean, it didn't resemble a 454 Chevy. I'm trying to keep my sense of humor.
Yeah, please do. That's fine. So, anyway, your main job, you obviously were able finally to lift this thing all the way out.
Right.
And obviously at that point you'd be able to see very clearly its shape, right?
Exactly. Because meanwhile, while we're out there, you got guys with brooms on top of this thing trying to dig off the dirt. And one thing I didn't mention before, too, is that whenever you hit this thing with a shovel...
Yes.
I mean, just because I did that a couple of times.
Right.
It would have a nick in it. Then after you bring the shovel back down, the nick would be gone.
Really?
The nick would be totally gone. I mean, like I said,
in other words,
it was very, very flexible.
It sort of reshaped itself.
It reshaped itself.
Now,
I didn't want to say that, but...
Again, that's all right. I don't mind. The shape of the craft, though, when you had it fully up and you could really take a good look at it as it was going to the flatbed, you would, again, describe it as a triangle.
As a triangle.
But with...
There was rounded edges.
Rounded edges. Right.
It was an oval triangle.
Okay.
It was an oval with a point with like
okay, no, I can draw what I'm able to...
You took some silly putty and rolled it up and made yourself an oval and then took one end and tried to stretch that out a little bit, what would you have? You'd have an oval triangle.
Yeah, that's right. No,
with rounded edges. There you go.
I just did it myself, and I see exactly what it was like.
Right. And it was, I'd say probably 10 feet tall. 10 feet tall at its tallest point.
Uh-huh.
And it narrowed down to about 6 feet tall in the nose.
All right, you've already given me one very unusual thing about its makeup, its metal or whatever it was.
It was shiny.
The skin, and it was shiny.
Shiny like stainless steel. I mean, there was no burn marks or anything on it, but it was shiny like stainless steel. That's my word, Art.
Had there been any apparent fire?
No.
No fire.
There was no burn marks on it whatsoever. I mean, there wasn't a scratch on this thing, except for the gas that was on the side where the tubes were coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where some of the metal...
Okay, so there must have been some debris then.
Yes, there was. Yes, there was. About the last 80 to 50 yards or so, there was debris from the first or second tree. That's why I'm assuming that the gas happened because of the trees, because if you know anything about fir trees, they're going to stand there like an oak.
What happened to the smaller pieces of metal?
Well, that's when the troops were out there picking them up. They were doing police call. One of the can I call them government gurus?
If you wish.
Okay, one of the government gurus was out there instructing them to pick up every little piece, no matter how minute, how many little pieces, and they had little trash bags to put them in. I mean, to say the least. And they had probably 20 guys out there. It looked like they had a whole platoon out there picking up these little bitty pieces and putting them into these bags, and he said, no pieces unleft.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, Mike and I, we got the craft up, and we had to spin it around. So one of us had to drop our wrecker. One of us had to drop our end after we got it out of the dirt and after they got all the dirt off of it and everything else. And I had to take my wrecker around with the sling still hooked up, and I spun it around. Mike came around with his boom, and then he lifted it up, and so we're sitting there, and then the flatbed backed right underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
And then we dropped it right down onto the flatbed, and it took them at least 2 hours to tarp this thing because it was definitely oversized for the flatbed. And they had to wait for, I'm assuming that they had to wait for clearance and everything else to take it down the Autobahn. That was the main clear thing that they were going to do.
They had to go right down the Autobahn?
Oh, well, that's what I'm assuming, that they had to take it down the Autobahn. How else were they going to get it down wherever they were taking it to? They brought it in on a truck.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of weird stuff on the interstates. It's always covered with tarp, and you always go, oh, man, I wonder what that is.
They had to build with 2x4s something to take away the silhouette of this thing. I mean, the tarp was not on the craft. It was on 2x4s. They were constructing something to take away the silhouette, so they could transport it down the highway.
Mm-hmm.
And we're there during this whole thing because now we're in the third day, by the time this is all going on and everything else. And they were waiting for darkness to take that thing out of there. I mean, they took it out into the field, and they had an MP perimeter around this whole area. And they didn't want to work at night because they didn't want to draw attention to anything. Hey, I'm just assuming that, you know? Hey, I was in the military. I know these things. And so anyway, that was a stupid statement.
That's all right. Don't worry about it. Just let this story unwind the way it's going to unwind.
So anyway, at the end of the third day, they brought in a sanitation team. Okay, now these were, I'm assuming they're government gurus too. These guys are specialists. You know, they brought this all in. They got 2 bulldozers in there now. They're covering in the hole. They're taking the trees away. I mean, they cut them up, you know, with chainsaws. They're taking the trees away in dump trucks. I mean, they're just sanitizing this whole area. Time.
Were there
burning, huh?
Were there officers of rank there?
Yes, there were officers there.
Of what rank?
One was a full bird colonel.
Full bird.
One was a full bird colonel.
And he was directing matters.
He was directing the matter, and he was in and out. He was in and out.
All right, Deek. A few questions for you. Is there any way that you could approximate or guess the weight of the craft?
Well, the flatbed trailer that they brought in there was a triaxle, and the wreckers were groaning even under the stilts. So, and even with the boom supports on there and everything else, it increases the wrecker weight to about 15,000 pounds each.
Okay.
So with both wreckers groaning, and this is just a guess, Art.
Right.
I would say anywhere between 20 to 30,000 pounds.
All right, thanks. That's all I wanted was a guess. Some people are saying, well, if you hit it with a shovel and it sort of repaired itself or resealed itself.
Why was the gash in there?
That's right, the big hole.
Well, maybe the gas was too big to repair itself because it tore away some of the matter. I never tore away none of the matter. You would just make an indentation where you hit it with the shovel. You know, when you're taking a little small spade and thrusting it up, because you got to understand, I mean, I'm dealing with forest topsoil there with a lot of roots and everything else, so I got to thrust it down in there with my boot and everything else.
Right.
So when I'm thrusting it up underneath there, obviously it's going to make a mark there on the belly side of the craft.
Uh-huh. All right. Were there any German authorities on the site?
None.
None.
So this was nobody speaking German there whatsoever.
Okay, this was all American then all the way.
It was all military. They had an MP. They had MPs there. And about this time, after everything was coming down,
Deek, was there anybody there recording this on film or any other
government
media?
Guru guy was.
So there was a recording there?
Yes, there was. They were taking pictures and everything.
Okay. I've got a number of questions. We've got to eventually close this out, but a number of questions for you. Why, after all these years, Deek, an obvious question, are you deciding to tell this story now?
Well, Art, I've lived with this for 20 years. And you live with something like this for 20 years. You want to get it done and get it off your chest. Look, this story needs to be told. And I've been out of the military now since '89. And, you know, you hear a lot of things and everything about the government secrecy and everything else. Look, we have to have secrecy. We have to have it for national security-related issues. But something like this, it needs to be told. They're out there.
All right. Once this entire operation was concluded, Deek,
yes.
Was everybody rounded up?
Yes, everybody was rounded up. We had to drive back to the garrison area. We weren't allowed to speak to anybody. We were put onto a bus out of the field area and shipped up the hill to the 11th ACR caserne, where the 11th ACR was, where they had the barracks and everything.
Right.
And we were put into one barracks. It was the 1st and the 13th, and we were on the first floor, and they put us all in there. And when the full bird colonel come walking in. And this was our debriefing. And, well, if you want to call it debriefing, what it was
I
they were
do.
reading the riot act.
Yeah, okay, what did they say to you?
All right, well, the colonel had come up there, and he had paused for a moment, and he had said, okay, gentlemen, he said, what you've seen here today is not to be spoke of outside this room. You're not to speak of it amongst yourselves, to nothing or nobody, not even your wives, not even your grandchildren. And he says to do so, you would be subject to UCMJ, which is the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and I would not hesitate to put one of you away for 20 to 30 years in Fort Leavenworth. And while he's doing that, the government gurus are putting. I didn't mention this either. We had to sign a security agreement. And then he goes on with his.
Did you read what you signed?
I didn't. He just said sign them. This is he told us this was a security agreement with the United States government, and I'm just summarizing it for you.
Okay.
And he said, quote, "This is on a need-to-know basis, gentlemen, and I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that there is nobody in this room or outside this room that has a need-to-know basis. So in other words, just keep your mouth shut, sign the paper, send them forward."
All right. Again, give me the exact date of this crash and the subsequent 3-day
retrieval. The date is hard to put down. It happened in late September during Reforger.
Late September.
Because we had been up there in the field for about 2 weeks right after this had happened. I would say...
So that was in late September of 1982 during Reforger.
Yes.
That'll pin it down pretty well.
Right.
How far? Do you remember how far into Reforger it was?
Yeah, it was about, I'd say, a good 10 days, right in the thick of things.
Okay, that'll nail it down pretty well.
Right in the thick of things, or Reforger.
All right. So you signed the security agreement. Everybody properly had the hell scared out of them, I guess.
Yeah, and at that time, I'm still a kid. And when this full bird colonel stands up there and he's telling you this, and he's speaking in a real firm voice when he's saying this, and you don't tell nobody.
Yes.
And That was basically it. I've never spoken of the incident until I wrote it down on paper and faxed it to you.
All right, what a fax. Then luckily you got through, and then finally we've connected with you here on a landline. All right, a couple of additional things. You've kept in contact and still are in contact with your friend Mike?
Yes, I am.
So he's available to back up what you say or not?
Well, he doesn't know I'm doing this right now.
Well, no, I realize that, but I mean, if he were confronted, let's say, you think he would back up your story, or he would hold to his security agreement?
Well, I owe him a few Charlie horses. I could threaten him with that.
All right. There are, how many total people would you say, beginning to end, had knowledge of this, direct knowledge, having seen the craft and or
50 to 60 people.
How many?
50 to 60.
50 to 60.
Right, 50 to 60, and most of them were just ordinary soldiers.
All right. We would like these people to get in touch.
I'm not counting the government gurus and the officers.
Well, they're less likely to talk to us. But 50 to 60 other either enlisted or officers.
Right. Well, they were all soldiers. Yeah, the 50 to 60 were all soldiers. They were from various companies, the 293rd, the 48th, and the 29th.
All right.
And our sister company was there, too, the 24th Supplying Service out of Gießen.
All right. So if you were to appeal right now, which is what you can do, to these various groups, you would appeal to what groups? I would like anybody out there who hears this appeal to email me, artbell@mindspring.com, ARTBELL at mindspring.com. And who would you appeal to send me an email to back up your story?
I would appeal to anybody that was in the 29th Supply and Service Company, stationed in Baumholder, anybody in the 24th Supply and Service Company out of Gießen, anybody in the 293rd Combat Engineers, and anybody in the 48th Maintenance, and anybody that was in the tent that morning that heard that loud bang and the thud. And anybody that knows about this,
all right,
please contact Art.
All right.
Please.
All right. I want to additionally inform you that Dr. Stephen Greer of CSETI and a man named Dr. Stanton Friedman, who's a nuclear physicist into this sort of thing, both would like to contact you. And also Linda Moulton Howe. Linda Moulton Howe as well. You may have heard her on my show. They all would like to speak to you. And I have, of course, your cell phone. So with your permission, I will
currently, right now, I'm with the Department of the Interior in the state of Maine, and I'm going down to North Carolina to get some largemouth bass to introduce them to some of the lakes up there, because we have a very poor largemouth bass.
So that's the time.
So when I get home, I mean, they can call me on my home phone number, and I just got that phone hooked up.
But I do have your cell number, and
yes, sir. Yes,
that would be all right too, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you most certainly may.
Wanted to be sure I had permission. Now you've just identified where you work now. That was up to you. You said it.
That's not a problem. I don't care. I mean, it's you know, if they wanted to figure out, all they would have to do is just go back to my military record, find my address in Maine, and go see my folks. And my folks says, "Oh, he works for the Department of Interior in Maine."
So, what do you think the repercussions of what you're doing right now might be?
I don't know. I don't really know. And I'll tell you the truth. I mean, at 20 years, I mean,
how old are you now?
39.
I'm sorry?
Well, 39 May 1st.
39 May 1st. Huh?
Yeah, the end of the world's coming 1 year away.
Think so?
I'm going to be 40.
40, huh? Oh, look, you'll do all right. You'll make it. So, everything you've told me, is there anything that I've missed that was important or critical?
No. Everything. I just wanted to remind you about the ammonia. I forgot to tell you about the gas mask and the ammonia.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I could have wrote you a 7-page fax with everything, but
it was sufficient, believe me, to get me interested. All right, my friend. I'm going to pass this on to people who know how to investigate this sort of thing, and they'll be in touch with you, and they'll be very nice. They're not Nazi inquisitors, so they'll just ask you some questions, and they'll do it with the background of having heard all of this tonight. All right?
One more thing, Art.
Yes, Steve.
You guys out there that know about this, please contact Art. If anything, just do it for a fellow soldier. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deek. Good night.
Talk to you later, Art.
Holy smokes. So, what do you say to all that? Well, now it's going to get turned over to the big boys and girls, and we'll see where it goes. But that was a lot of detail. That was a lot of accuracy. And I think I believe the man. I don't know. It's like everything else. We submit it to you, the listener, and in this case, others. And we'll see where it goes. But I think you just heard a very important